What? Wilkins? When? Zebulon? Oh, Melly, he's not on it! He's not on it! Scarlett O'Hara was right. Her beloved Ashley Wilkes was not on the infamous Gettysburg casualty list that arrived that hot, sweltering day in July 1863. In this chapter of Margaret Mitchell's epic novel, Gone with the Wind, we encounter a realistic but fictional portrayal of what thousands of families during the American Civil War dreaded most: a casualty list that possibly bore the names of their dead men and boys on a battlefield. In this chapter, may we grasp how Scarlett and Melly demonstrate what it truly means to be hopeful in light of pending devastation. I hope you enjoyed this chapter of Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. On the 3rd of July, a sudden silence fell from the wires of the North till ungarbled reports began to trickle into Atlanta. There had been hard fighting in Pennsylvania near a little town named Gettysburg. The news was uncertain, slow in coming, for the battle had been fought in the enemy's territory. There was hardly a house in town that had not sent away a son, a brother, a husband to this battle. They all waited to hear the news that death had come to their homes. Oh, they expected death. They did not expect defeat. That thought they dismissed. Their men might be dying even now on the sun-parched grass of the Pennsylvania hills. They might be dying in thousands, thousands of fresh men in gray and butternut with the rebel yell on their lips would spring to the earth to take their places. Where these men would come from, no one knew. They only knew that Lee was miraculous and the Army of Virginia invincible. Scarlett and Melanie sat in front of the Daily Examiner office, sheltered beneath their parasols. Scarlett's hand shook so that the parasol wobbled above her head, but Melanie sat as though carved of stone, her dark eyes growing larger as time went by. She only made one remark in 2 hours. I'm not going to leave this place till I hear, and I'm not going to let Scarlett leave me either. Oh, Scarlett had no intention of leaving, no intention of placing herself where she could not have the first news of Ashley. She looked about the crowd, picking out friends and neighbors. Mrs. Meade, with her bonnet askew and her arm through that of 15-year-old Phil. Mrs. Elsing, erect as a Spartan mother, and Fanny Elsing, white as a ghost. There was a movement on the outskirts of the crowd, and those on foot gave way as Rhett Butler carefully edged his horse towards Aunt Pitty's carriage. Scarlett thought, he's got courage coming at a time like this. Wouldn't want to take anything from that mob to tear him to pieces, 'cause he wasn't in uniform. How dare he sit on that fine horse in his fancy white boots, shiny white linen suit, so sleek and so well fed, smoking an expensive cigar, when Ashley and all the other boys are fighting the Yankees, barefooted, sweltering in the heat, their bellies rotten with disease. Bitter looks were thrown at him as he came slowly through the press. Old men growled in their beards, and Mrs. Merriweather, who feared nothing, rose slightly in her carriage and said clearly, "Speculator!" in a tone that made the word most foulest and most venomous of epithets. He paid no heed to anyone, but raised his hat to Melly and Aunt Pitty, and, riding to Scarlett's side, leaned down and whispered, "Don't you think this would be a fine time for Dr. Meade to give his familiar speech about victory?" Her nerves taut with suspense, she turned on him as swiftly as an angry cat, hot words bubbling to her lips, but he stopped them with a gesture. "I came to tell you, ladies, that I have been to headquarters, and the casualty lists are finally coming in." At these words, a hum rose among near enough to hear his remark, and the crowd surged. "Don't go! The lists are being printed! Stay where you are!" you to come and tell us. When will they be posted?
They should be any minute, madam. The major in charge did not want to let that out for fear the crowd would wreck the offices trying to get the news. Ah, look!
The side window of the newspaper office opened, and a hand was extended, bearing a long, narrow sheaf of galley proofs, smeared with fresh ink, and thick, with names closely printed. The crowd fought for them, tearing the slips in half. Quick, Melly! Take it. The W's. Where were the W's? There they were at the bottom and all smeared up. What? Wilkins? Zebulon? Oh, Melly, he's not on it! He is not on it! Ashley was alive. He wasn't even wounded. How good God was to pass it by. How... She heard a low moan and turning, saw Fanny Elsing lay her head on her mother's bosom, saw the casualty list flutter to the floor of the carriage, saw Mrs. Elsing's thin lips quiver as she said quietly to the coachman, "Home. Quickly." Scarlett took a quick glance at the list. Hugh Elsing was not listed. Fanny must have had a beau, and now he was dead. Mrs. Meade was looking down into her lap, and she did not raise her head when her name was called. But the face of little Phil beside her was an open book that all might read. "You won't need those proofs now. Mother, you still got me, and if you let me, I will kill all the Yankees." "No!" "Phil made you hush your mouth. Do you think it'll help your mother to have you off getting shot too? I've never heard anything so silly. Drive us home, quick." The carriage moved off through the dispersing crowd. Some of the women were weeping with joy, but others looked too stunned to realize the heavy blows that had fallen upon them. Scarlett bent her head, reading over the blurred list rapidly to find the names of friends. Now that Ashley was safe, she could think of other people. Oh, how long the list was. How heavy the toll from Atlanta, from all of Georgia. Calvert, Rayford, Lieutenant, Rafe. Suddenly she remembered that day so long ago when they had decided to run away together, but had come home at nightfall because they were hungry and afraid of the dark. Fontaine, Joseph K. Braffett, Little Bad-Tempered Joe, and Sally Harley over having her baby. Monroe, Lafayette, Captain. And Leif had been engaged to Kathleen Calvert. Poor Kathleen. Hers had been a double loss, a brother and a sweetheart. But Sally's loss was greater, a brother and a husband. Oh, this was too terrible. She was almost afraid to read any further. Surely there couldn't be 3 Tarleton names on that list. Well, perhaps the hurried printer had repeated the name by error. But no, there they were. Tarleton, Brenton, Lieutenant. Tarleton, Stewart, Corporal. Tarleton, Thomas, Prophet. And Boyd, that the first year of the war was buried God knew where in Virginia. She could not read any more. She could not know if any other of those boys whom she had grown up, danced, kissed were on that list. She wished that she could cry, do something to ease the iron fingers that were digging into her throat.
"I'm sorry, Scarlett."
She had forgotten he was still there.
"Many of your friends?"
About every family in the county, and all all three of the Tarleton boys.